Alright, so I just thought I'd do a quick video here. Been doing these helicopters for about 15 years. Changing these connectors out is just kind of a fact of life, and soldering at one point or another. And so I've burnt a lot of fingers, and there's been four-letter words, and I've really struggled with this process of soldering for quite a while. But I've developed a process here, and it works pretty well, so I thought I would share it with you. These batteries I have for this helicopter all came with XT60s. In fact, across two different brand makes, they all came with XT60s. The helicopter has EC3s. So I ordered this bundle of EC3 connectors. These are males and females. As you can see, the males, they have the point, and the female is the hollowed out side. But also just worth kind of noting with the EC3s is there is a smaller side of the adapter, smaller side of the connector, and a larger side. So the male side is larger and actually goes over the top of the female side. So the first thing I did to kind of save myself from getting confused in this process was separate out the appropriate connectors and the appropriate inserts. Okay, so now I don't have to deal with all these. I can just put these off over here. Now this is my part-time solution when I got these batteries. It's just an XT60 to EC3 converter. So I'll put those over there. So here's my system. What I do is I set the battery up on boxes so that the lead can be straight. And then I take this item here, which I purchased on eBay. Priceless, absolutely priceless. These connectors are so small that they get red hot no matter what you do. I would not even attempt this without this item here. Okay, if I misplaced this, I would order another one before I tried to do this without it. So I have this item down here. It's got a little bit of a weighted foundation, which is nice to stand up. I don't use the magnifying glass. I orient the battery. Different batteries have different length leads. So as you can see here, I've already replaced the XT60 on one side. So now, one note prior to this: cut one side at a time, because you don't ever want shorting out. You never want to short, you never want to cut both wires, okay? So cut one wire, either the positive or the negative, keep it in the original connector while you're down here working to put this end on the other side. Then snap this new end into the connector, like up here. So I did the red wire first, pushed in here. Then I took my cutters and I cut off the XT60 from the other side. So while I was working on this wire over here, the way I am this black wire, this was on the black wire. So the red one couldn't short it out, ever. I could never have a short while I was doing this process, because this connector was on this black wire while I was working this end. So after I got the insert soldered on to that end and inserted it into the new connector, what I did was then I took my pliers and I cut off my XT60 from the other side. So now I've got a bare wire. Now usually when I do any kind of soldering or anything like that, connecting these wires, I would strip off more of this wire. I'll tell you, you really don't need much. I'm going to try to move this away from here just so we can get a look. You can see that's as much as I have stripped off this wire. Okay, it's not much at all, and you don't need much. As you can see on this one, okay, by stripping this amount off and soldering it into here and then pushing the connector into the, you don't wind up with any potential area for a short. Okay, and that's the number one concern with these batteries. You do not want to short. You never want to short. Okay, these batteries are very powerful burst energy, and you never want to short. So let's move this back out of the way. So while I'm working one side, I'll take the other side and just kind of hang it up however I'm using this that way. Now this one doesn't have an end on it, neither does this one, but I highly recommend these, by the way. These are your balance cell joint protectors, because these stupid clips here, this is a bad design. When you insert this into the charger, you have no room to get this out. You're trying to literally take your fingernails and pick this out. You wind up pulling on these leads. And in the event that you separate one, you got a problem that needs to be fixed now. So these things are like 10 cents a piece here, these series connector protectors, okay? Just don't even question it. Just order them. They're super easy to install. They do just clip right on, but I actually put a spot of glue under mine to keep them on there. These are, you know, no question. Add these to your batteries if they don't have them. So you got your series connector here, your balance connector. Add this connector protector to it here to stop any of these leads from getting pulled out, because that's a whole headache that you just don't want to deal with. God forbid that your charger malfunctions. When these batteries become unstable, it's not pretty. Definitely more than capable of burning down your home. So be careful with these batteries, and you know, you want to do this the right way. So back to this guy over here. What I'm going to do is see if I can all right, so the other thing that I've learned over time is that what you want to do is get your soldering iron in there on that connector piece and heat it up, okay? The other thing I'm doing is I'm taking the wire's natural lay, okay? That's why I have it oriented up on this box. Its natural way that it wants to run, and I'm trying to solder the connector onto it that way. That way when I push it into the new connector, it's not constantly trying to pull away. I want this to be straight, a straight line. So that's looking pretty good there. Now what you want to do is orient your soldering iron right up near the joint, right up behind it. Get it hot. Get the connector hot, get the wire hot, get all those things hot. Right, and then we want to grab our solder. Okay, I've got my headlight on here. This is really a useful tool for being able to see into these small spaces, unless you've got really substantial overhead lighting, which I do not. So my wire is oriented straight. I've got my holder holding the end piece, insert piece, and the wire in place. My soldering iron is hot and has heated both things. What I'm going to do now is take the solder and just push it in to try to get it to go down into the, yep, and there it goes. It's going right down into the connector, which is exactly what I want. And I'm just going to push in about 4, 5, 6 inches. There we go. And that is pretty good. I have a little tiny bit of slop there, but not much. I don't think I'm going to have any problem locking that into the connector. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this around, not a lot, but just a little, and see what I got going on the other side. It looks pretty full. I got a lot of solder in there in that one time, but I'm just going to come at it from the other side now. And again, I'm going to put this in here, heat everything up a little bit, give it a couple seconds, get my run of solder out, and I'm just going to try to feed some of this in there. Shorten this run up a little bit. Get this out, and I'm just going to try to feed it. I don't know what's Doesn't seem to want to really melt. Flip this head over a little. There it goes. There it goes. Oh yeah, filling that up. That is beautiful. Now, if we take a look here, you'll see just that is full. Okay, I just got that nice and full of solder. So not a lot of overflow either is what you want. These connectors, I mean, I gotta say, there's not a lot of room for error here. You really want that end cap filled with solder, but you don't want any solder on the actual thing itself, or it's not going to snap into the connector appropriately. So we've got that soldered on there like so, and what I'm doing here is now I'm just giving it about 15, 20, 25 seconds to cool off. So it should get nice and cool, and I don't run any risk of pulling it out of there while it's still hot. And then I'm just going to set it back over here. Now lastly, here's my last step here to finish this connector. I'm going to set aside my solder and my soldering gun, and I'm going to bring in a piece which was right for the job. This is a watering jacket for a Traxxas Venom boat, or Traxxas Spartan boat. I never used it, but I'm just going to use it right now to help me. Not using it for what it was intended for, I'm using it for a different job. So, we've got our red wire that already has the connector replaced. I'm just going to take it, move it over a little, and I'm going to insert the new one. Okay, right down in, that went in good. Okay, that little tiny bit of solder I got in there did not stop that connector from going down in. Now you'll see why I have this aluminum case here, okay? It was just the right height for me to be able to slide it up underneath and get support under this connector. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my smallest flathead screwdriver, okay, out of my little E-flite helicopter toolkit, and I'm going to reach into this connector and put pressure on that metal connector that we soldered on. And now this is where I need the water jacket as the base, because it's going to take some pressure and we're going to snap this metal ending into this plastic cap. And it's going to take some pressure. There it goes. It just snapped. Okay. So now it's snapped. And that's it. We're done. So now I have this battery here. Has this EC3 connector on it. As you can see, I have no overhang, no mess. You've seen how much I cut off the wires. It wasn't much. I could have done just a hair more, but that's fine the way it is. I have this connector here. As you can see, I can turn this connector. This is how well these wires are on there. Okay. So some things that you want to have for this process. You want some good cutters to cut these wires off this XT60, okay? And that's how far I cut from the connector, from the XT60. Not very far, okay? And it left some of the connector shrink tube on there, and I just cut that off. So there is what was cut off, and there is the back there. Okay, you want something to pile this battery on top of. This tape works great. It doesn't have to be that tape, but if you can get this tape, it does not stick. So when I pull this off this box, it won't destroy the box, which is nice. Orient your battery up like this. You want something to put the connector underneath so that you can put pressure on the metal insert and snap it into the connector, okay? And obviously you want to have this. I'm using this solder here. I really like it. It comes in the tube. I got a couple of these different tubes. I've got some solder that came in a kit over here. This stuff is too thick and it just doesn't burn well for me. I can't get it to make these connectors really well. This stuff works terrific. It melts easy enough. It's good. Soldering iron is nothing fancy. It's just your basic soldering pen. So this is my setup, and this is how I go from XT60s on here to these EC3s on here, or any other type of connector. I like Dean's plugs a lot. If I was going to get rid of EC3s, I'd probably go to Dean's plugs. But the helicopter, I don't really want to modify the helicopter. Now, a note on the wires. These are 10 gauge wires. 10 gauge with EC3. Oh no, I'm sorry. These are 12 gauge wires. Okay. 12 gauge wires is great with EC3, okay, but I had another helicopter where a lot of the batteries were 10 gauge wire. They're a lot thicker than this, and it had an EC3 connector on it. Extremely hard to get that thick of a wire into this little EC3 connector, these little metal pieces. I couldn't do it. So after a couple times of failing at it, what I did was I put an EC5 connector on the speed control. 10 gauge wire goes into these larger EC5 plugs better. But this is a smaller helicopter. These are only 10 gauge or 12 gauge wires. So the EC3 was fine. So that's my little soldering video. Hopefully it helps you put a little package together and how to get through this process in a good way without burning your fingers off. We'll see you later. I just wanted to come back to this step of the process one more time because this, I think, is the one step that I've changed the most through time. Is when you are actually going to do the soldering, what you really want to do is put this soldering iron on the connector and the wire like so, and really heat up the connector and the wire. Really give it a solid 15, 20, 25 seconds. You really want to heat everything up. And then I'm trying to put this down here. Let's try to lift this up just a little. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So I'm putting, this one's already done, but I'm putting the soldering iron on the edge of this connector, and I'm really heating it up as much as I can, and then I'm bringing the solder in, and I don't know if I'm going to get it to do it again because it's already soldered, but I was hitting this solder like right over here. It wasn't even touching the soldering iron, but everything was so super hot that it was just melting from over here, and it just totally filled the connector and everything else. So just keep in mind, I mean, I'm not hitting the soldering iron with the solder. I'm heating up this connector right here, which is why it's got to be in these helping hands, and then I'm melting it actually like from over here. This one is already soldered, so it's not even, you know, there's so much solder in this now that it's not going to work. But so heat it up, the wire and the unit with the soldering gun, and then bring the solder in and melt it into that area. So I just want to go over this little part of it one more time. I've got the connector in the helping hands, the wire fed in, and I've got the soldering iron right in there on the connector, heating it up. And now I'm bringing my solder in, and you'll see that this solder is actually melting on the connector and the wire because they've been heated up by the soldering iron. And we're just filling that gap between the wire and the connector. So you see me coming in there, and there we go. Now the actual wire in the connector is melting the solder. You can see it there. And we're just filling that gap, filling that area, and you can see the solder just running down into the connector. Oh, that's beautiful. Beauty. And now it's all full of solder. And that connector there, that connection is completed. And next we're going to do is let it sit and cool for about 30 seconds, and then I will put, that's a red, so it's going to go into the square end of this XT30. Excuse me, EC3. It's going to go into the square end of this EC3, and then I'll have the two ends on there, and then I'll cut that black wire right where I cut that red wire, and I'll repeat the process that you just seen there, and push the black connector in over on the round side.